Hey guys. Okay, so a bit of a heads up from the very start. Unfortunately, I am on the tail end of a head cold. As a result, as you'll soon hear, the voice is a little bit croaky, and there is a chance that I'm going to break into like a coughing fit or a sneezing fit as I try to record this week's video. But I figure, hey, what have I got to lose? Let's give it a shot and see how I go. So this week, what I want to do is continue the whole house dating theme. More specifically, I want to look at how you can use two lot occupation resources, being the postal records and the electoral records, to help you hopefully narrow down the date of construction, and better still, to hopefully help you work out whether a house is pre or post 1911 construction. Now, my plan for today is exactly the same as what we've done in the previous two videos. I want to introduce you guys to what the resources are, which direction to run in to access those resources, and then I want to give you 3 tips on how to use those resources. So let's start with the postal records. Now, a bit of background. I currently have Ella doing some work experience with me. I took her to meet Marianne, aka the house detective, a few weeks ago. Marianne was giving her a bit of a overview as to what all these resources are, and she had the best description when it came to the postal records. I was like, damn, I'm gonna steal that. So I am paraphrasing here, but basically when she was talking to Ella, she said the postal records are essentially the original yellow pages. Now, just a bit of side comment here. Ella in that moment, she sat there and went, yellow what? What are you guys talking about? Mary and I sat there and went, damn, don't we feel old? Like, this is a humbling moment. I feel old right now. It was absolutely hilarious because I didn't realize I was that old. In that moment, I realized, yep, I am that old. But anyway, for those of you like me that are old enough to remember the yellow pages, the postal records is exactly the same, but instead of listing phone numbers, it listed addresses for people. Now, I use the postal records in probably 4 key ways. The first way, so I go through the postal records and I work out how many people were living in that portion of the street back in the 1911 period. Then what I do is I jump across to the detail plan, assuming the house that I'm looking at is visible in the detail plan. I then work out how many houses were in that portion of the street in that detail plan at that point in time. So let's say for argument's sake, when I'm looking at the postal records, there are 5 people listed. And then I jump across to the detail plan. Let's assume the detail plan's dated like 1920, and there are 8 people listed there. That would then lead me to say, okay, this house has a 5 in 8 chance of being pre-1911. Keeping in mind, like I suggested in last week's video, with this house dating stuff, you are very, very rarely ever going to get a direct hit in terms of, boom, I've got the date to work with, or I know it's pre or post 1911. Most of the time, what you're trying to do here is put the puzzle pieces together to build a case to argue on a balance of probabilities it is one way or the other. So yeah, in this situation, I go, okay, it's got a 5 in 8 chance of being pre-1911. Obviously, the higher the number, the higher the odds, starts to tip the scales in that favor. So that's the first way. The second way is if I look at the postal records, I get the names and I cross-reference that. If I've done the historical title search, I cross-reference that against the historical title search and the name of the person that owned the property back in that 1911 period and see if there is a direct match there. Next thing I do is I get the postal, I go to the postal records and I see if there's actually a house name listed there. And if there is, I cross-reference that against the house names on the detail plans. So I was looking at a job just yesterday, which is in Windsor. So I saw the person's name and then in inverted commas, it had something like, I'm probably getting the pronunciation wrong here, but it had something like Lalomi. And then when I jumped across the detail plan, I found a house within that portion of the street that had Lalomi written on it. And I was like, boom, direct match. Okay, here we go. Then the other way that I use it is basically I get the names from the postal records and I search them in Trove to see if there's some sort of match there or additional information that I can piggyback off to build more of a case. So an example I had recently, again, another property at Windsor, I was looking through, found a name, found a newspaper article in Trove, and it was like a funeral notice or something like that. And it said basically son such and such was holding the wake, and they used different names back then, but the wake at their family home at such and such street in Windsor. And I was like, boom, okay, there we go. I can piece this together. That's the property I was looking for. I've got the answer I was chasing there. So yeah, there's 4 key ways I can use it. Now, where do you go to access these postal records? I think, and I say think because I actually have a digitized copy that I use personally, so I haven't had to go and research it myself for a while, but I believe that you can actually access it through Brisbane City Council's archives, and that's at Maruka. And you may be able to access it through the State Library. Don't quote me on that one, but you can definitely get it through the archives. Now, in terms of 3 tips, just like last week, I've scribbled down my little notes so I can make sure I stay on track. The first thing you need to understand when it comes to these postal records is you needed to pay to be in the book. So if money was a little bit tight that year, you may not necessarily have wanted to pay for that extra, what's the word, luxury. You may not have seen it as like a necessity, and therefore you would not have been recorded that week. So you got to take that information into account. Second thing, very similar point, you had to be home at the time the collection people came around to be counted. So if you were away on holidays or something like that, you wouldn't have been counted that year. And then the final thing you need to understand is that the books were they were usually published in the year after the date of collection. So you need to work backwards. So basically, if you're trying to work out whether a house is pre-1911 construction, you want to look at the 1912 version, etc. So that is the postal records. Now we come to the electoral records. I'm gonna be honest with you guys up front, I don't know anything about these. And that's simply because I don't have my own digitized copy. So therefore, to be able to access them, I'd have to go into the state library, which is where you do go to get this. And again, I think archives may have a copy as well. I know you can definitely get it through the state library though. You can access it through like ancestry.com, websites like that. So yeah, you can go there, but because you have to go to that effort, I don't have the time to go to that effort, so I don't usually go to this extent. But I'm assuming what you would do is exactly the same as the postal records. You basically track down the names for that portion of the street, and then you cross-reference it against the other resources we've talked about in previous videos, or that I'm going to talk about next week. And in terms of tips, yeah, I've got none, because like I said, I don't actually use that resource. So there you go. Hopefully today's video has given you guys 2 more resources, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to stick with resources that you can add to your house dating kit, so you can try and, like I said, narrow down the date of construction and hopefully work out whether a house on a balance of probabilities is pre or post 1911 construction. I think that covers off everything I want to talk about. The voice lasted. Yes, I made it. Until next time, thanks for watching.
For all you red tape lovers out there, I have one thing to say. Well, no, actually, I've got 3. Number 1, the advice provided in these videos is general in nature. It's not site specific. You would be a silly billy to go and make financial decisions based on this advice without first checking with the town planner. Don't be a silly billy. Number 2, Brisbane town planning is in no way linked to Brisbane City Council. The views expressed in these videos are my own, not council's. So if you don't like them, blame me, not council. Number 3, what was my number 3? Oh yeah, the views expressed in these videos are accurate at the time of recording. If you're watching this video back 10 years from now, the views may not be so accurate. That's all. Bye.